using variables and maybe some if statements. What I'm doing right now is going to Google Classroom, pulling up the assignment prompt, because on there they have some starter code for you to use. I go to classwork, I'm going to scroll down to assignment 3, shape patterns. Click. Nice. And so here's the example I showed, some rings going from the left side of the screen over to the right hand side. It's a shape, it creates a pattern, the color also changes. Now we borrow all this stuff. So maybe as you are starting, you copy and paste all this. It's in 2 segments, so be sure to get that second segment. I started a new pen. Here is how you rename things. This is shape patterns demo. It is saved. I go to settings. Because I started a new pen, a lot of you are beginning to notice, my code doesn't work. Well, make sure you add in, because you start a new pen, you tell the computer, I'm using p5.js right now. That's the language I'm speaking. So please understand that. You have to add that library in. I'm going to get this second half of code, copy that, paste it in the code pen. Ta-dang. Now if I click run, hopefully I see something. So once you do that and you copy and paste it properly, you should be able to see a grayish circle on a gray background that starts at the bottom of the screen and moves up. For the purposes of this demo, because my screen resolution is kind of weird, I'm going to make a way smaller canvas, 400 by 400. I'm going to change the y coordinate to start at towards the bottom, 350. Hopefully that's easier to see. I rerun my code. And yeah, so now you'll see, maybe I'll zoom out ever so slightly. Now you see, with a quick switch of coordinates, there's your beginning animation. And I'm going to walk you through what's going on. So at the very top, for now, we're going to declare variables up here. Remember, declaring is the first step. You need to tell the computer this variable exists. That happens at the top. I go into why more so second semester. For most of the semester, any variables you use, try to have them at the beginning of your program. Then down here in setup, you're noticing that the setup function, that typically is where you create your canvas, add a background, and you should also begin to learn that setup only happens once. You set up your canvas, your station once, and you're good to go. This is where we initialize the variables, x equals 50, y equals 50. We only want that to its initial values, and the initialization step happens in setup. We create our canvas, and now here comes the interesting part, draw. We draw our background, then we draw a circle. We'll go over if statements soon, and so far, as I comment out this stuff, this is all I've talked about. Save and run. So a circle starts at the bottom and keeps going up. Without that new piece of information, your circle just goes off the screen. So it keeps going, keeps going, keeps going to infinity and beyond. So you have to click run again, or refresh the page, or make a change in your code to see your circle. Remember, this is the third step when using variables. It's modifying, or otherwise known as updating. Y is decreasing by 1, and that's why it moves up the screen. A reminder that y grows positively downwards. It's a little different from math class. Now, let's say I wanted to add in another variable. Okay, position's great, but let's say I also want to change size. So I add in a new variable. I declare it up here next to var. That's step 1. Step 2, maybe down here, my initial size will be 10. I initialized it in setup. That was step 2. And then I got to use it. Just like I did x and y here, maybe now with size, I replace it here and here. As I save and run, there should be no big change. The circle is smaller because I set it to 10, and I just want to see, does my code run? Okay, nice. Now let's make it more interesting. Let's add some change in the size. Let's update size. Maybe I want to grow a little bit. Size equals size plus 8. Why not? So what this line says is size starts at 10. That's what I initialized it to. The next time I flip my flipbook, size is increased by 8 pixels, so now it's 18. And the next time I flip to the next page, it grows by another 8, it's at 26. I grow by 8 again, I flip over the page, it's up to like 34, so on and so forth. And that's what allows it to move, that's what allows it to expand in size. So that's what I'm expecting to see. Let's, ooh, okay. And maybe I should decrease that. That happened really fast. So maybe I'll make it 0.5 instead. So I'm going to save and run. Maybe this will happen a lot slower. Ooh. And notice, like, it still moves up the screen. You have two kinds of behavior happening at once. Right? You have the ability to create any variables you want, as long as you don't use a word that's already been used. And now I'm changing vertical position in addition to size. The spirit of this assignment has something like, you can play around with background. You will get a different effect when, like not drawing the background over and over again, you get this kind of shape, which is very similar to my example. Maybe instead of filling, I write in no fill. Then you'll have the outlines be there, and you'll see something else, right? Maybe that's something you want to play around with. Change color, for example, or maybe change Y position. So far, so good? Now, here comes the reset behavior, right? Here's the new part. Along with variables, what's really helpful are something called if statements. Again, if you've taken geometry class, you've seen conditionals, if-then statements. It's really useful for coding. Why? Because now you can add in more complicated behavior. So at the very beginning, I reset the position. Notice, like, right, like now that I've added back in this code, it starts at the bottom, grows to the top, and then notice it goes back to the bottom, and it keeps going up to the top. Right now, I didn't give any boundary. I didn't say anything about size. So as you look at it, there's kind of like overlapping layers of circles that are kind of gray. Circle keeps getting bigger, and gradually it fills up the screen to get a pretty neat looking pattern. Maybe I will change. So let me explain what's going on. Save and run from the very beginning. So circles keeps moving, keeps moving, keeps moving, keeps moving. And then right about here, when the circle, can I stop that? I don't think I can. So right when the circle hits, the middle of the circle hits the top, that's when Y becomes negative. When Y is less than 0, that's how you know you hit the top of your screen. I'm telling the computer when that happens, I want you to go to the bottom. So really my height here is like 350, let's say. Okay, so watch the center, watch the center, watch the center. I'm controlling the behavior. Whoop, that's when it hit, unless it goes back down there. And it happens again when the center of this circle hits the top part of the screen. When Y is less than 0, then you're going to go back to 350. Size keeps growing, but Y coordinates are like reset. That's how you use an if statement. Usually it involves a variable. Most of the time it involves some kind of comparison, less than, equal to, equal tos. That's the behavior that will go in here. And then when that occurs, then what do you want to happen? You put in squiggly brackets the next behavior you want. So maybe each time that happens, I'm gonna fill this to be red, right? So let's see what happens now. It starts gray. It starts at the bottom. It keeps going up, and then as soon as the first time it touches the screen, at the top, it should. Oh right, I had a no fill. So maybe I'll do stroke instead. Okay. So let's walk through this code. It starts down here, keeps going up, keeps going up. Now, when it hits the top, when Y is less than 0, the stroke should change. Darn, I forgot to add the other 2 coordinates. Third time's the charm, right? So again, starts at the bottom, and now I should expect to see it turn red. Go, blast. Okay. One more time. Stroke. I think it's because I have it up here. I reset it to be gray each time. And it's because my ellipse is drawn right here. You know, like the order of code matters. I make it gray. I already drew my circle. I turn it red, but when I turn to the next page, I reset it to gray. So right now it's not as useful. Maybe if I comment this out, it starts off as its default color, probably a black. Yep. And now, because I commented out the gray line, when it hits the top, now it turns red. And it stays red because I didn't tell it to change its behavior. It reapplied the red color every iteration. So there are some if statements. If you need more guidance on it, Lesson 11 in Code.org's lesson series goes more in depth through a game lab example. That same code should work in CodePen. So I'll pause my lecture here. That was already a bunch of talking. The time is yours. Please ask me questions. Please work on your programs, even if it's just moving things left and right. Understanding why it's doing that behavior is super important. And I'll tell you more about if statements and variable amount of information.